Hello, and a very warm welcome to the Journey Journals by Life of Gaia. My name is Gaia, and this is the channel where we explore people's journeys into the unknown to discover themselves. And today it is my absolute pleasure to introduce a lady who I met very recently, but who has had such a huge impact on me just in the last few days. And she's had such an impact on me because of her remarkable story, but not just her remarkable story, but really her remarkable way of being. And so it is my honor today to introduce you to Vickie Menendez. Very warm welcome to you, Vickie.
Thank you. Thank you, Gaia. Thank you so much for having me here and allowing me to share my story.
Absolutely. Vickie, as I mentioned, you have a profoundly moving story. Could you please share it with us?
Sure, I'd love to. My story is about profound loss. I had 4 children with my first husband. The first child that I had with him was a full-term stillborn. That was in 1980, so we're going back quite a ways, and that was my first loss. A lot of things happened over those years. I had 3 other children with him, and then in 2016, my son, who was 33 at the time, I found dead from an overdose, a drug overdose. And that was kind of a visual that sticks with you, that you can't quite forget. And then this year, February the 10th, I lost my daughter after a 48-day struggle for her life in the hospital, which brought on a lot of healing within the family that I'm going to be sharing in my book. But when I got home, 12 days later, my 37-year-old son died of a drowning accident. And that was a total shock. You know, I was with my daughter for 48 days. I had time to be with her, to hold her hand, to talk to her. And I didn't have that with him. So I've experienced so many different types of loss in my life. And, you know, they say that we should never have to bury our children. And it's so true. It's really heart shattering, but I found a way to look at it with through a different lens, and to see the beauty and all of the pain. And so I turned my pain into purpose.
Vickie, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I'm truly sorry and oftentimes speechless for your loss. And I get that it's the journey that every single parent dreads, and yours is not only multiplied by 3, but also very, very recent. And so I thank you, for starters, for being on here and for sharing this with us. And I wanted to ask you, what are some of the challenges that you face specifically after losing your children, and how do you actually cope with them? Because it's, as we discussed prior, I've dealt with grief myself, and you just seem to have such a remarkable way of coping with so much loss.
Well, the way I dealt with this loss was, just to backtrack a little bit, after Wesley passed in 2016, I went for a few years of feeling that pain and not really knowing what to do with it. And it led me to reaching out to find healing within myself. We tend to layer on all of the traumas, the wounds, everything that happens to us. And it can be simple things that just pile up, that you store within your body. And I realized I needed help with that. I also had a sexual trauma as a teenager that had stuck, that was in there somewhere. I had bullying in school, a lot of things that tended to hold me back. So I started that healing journey, and it helped to prepare me for this radical loss that I just went through. I mean, it's enough to lose one child, but to lose two in 12 days was, it totally shattered my heart, and it made me sit and think and just reprioritize my life and think about what it is that I really want to put forth in this lifetime. It put kind of a fire under me, that all of these goals, all of these things that I wanted to do, that I wanted to share with the world, is not going anywhere unless I start sharing it with the world. And this was so profound that it kind of gives you, I felt like I got all of their hopes, their dreams, their energy that they had, that they wanted to share with the world, and they gave all of that to me, and it just magnified everything that I wanted to share.
That's incredible. And, going to the topic of meaning, I find that, especially in the face of profound loss and grief, there's a big absence of meaning, or at least a questioning around meaning in general, and a lot of questions that come up with a person's passing or a person's death or the loss of someone. How do you find hope and meaning in the face of the pain that you experience and the loss that you experience?
Um, I, when I was in the hospital with my daughter, I went there thinking that I was going to do all these great things for her. I was going to go in and do all of these healing sessions, which I did, and I don't regret doing those. But I really thought that I was going to be able to go in and do more than what I was doing, and I realized that I was supposed to surrender to God's will. God has a plan. And Wayne Dyer says, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. And, we want everything to happen the way we want it. And I realized that it may not go the way I wanted it to go, that I had to surrender and trust that his plan was in the works, and that I may not know right now what the silver lining is going to be, but I know and I trust, because I do believe that the answer is out there, and it's coming, like all of the synchronicities that have happened since these two passings recently has left me open for messages. We tend to want to make things happen for ourselves, and that's okay. You need to step toward your goals, but also have the ability to allow things to come in their own time. And as I was with my daughter, I realized that I wasn't there to save her. I was just there to help her soul do the work that it needed to do, to be that grounding or anchor for everyone to feel the love, and just to come there with love in my heart. And, I've heard of stories about things like this happening where everybody starts fighting and they start blaming and judging. And we had none of that in the hospital. We were coming from love, no judgment. If somebody didn't want to be in the room at a given time, we didn't judge each other. We just let them do what they felt like they needed to do at the time. And I think it's just surrendering and trusting that there's such a much bigger plan in the works, and we can't question that. If we question what's going on or why did this happen, then we're questioning his plan. And it just kind of opened me and just cracked me wide open to be a receiver. And ever since that happened, there's been one synchronicity or coincidence after another that has guided me along the path that I'm on right now.
Would you like to share one of those synchronicities? I know that in a prior conversation, you shared about an absolutely beautiful sailing experience you had recently.
Yes, I was standing on my balcony one day and I was watching. I'm lucky enough to be right here next to the bay, and I see the boats coming and going. And I've never been on a sailboat before. And I always wanted to go sailing and learn how to sail. And so I said to my friend, I had a really good friend that came in just to be with me, just to allow me to be and to process this whole thing. And I told her, I said, I would love to go sailing. So the next day, I have a client from Texas that her nephew has a charter company in the islands in St. Vincent. And she said, do you want to go sailing with me? And I'm like, oh, heck yeah. I just asked for that yesterday, right? So we go to the islands. We're on the sailboat. I noticed looking down at the water that it's vibrating, it's pulsating. And I'm like, wow, I have all of this energy around me. And so I started looking for the signs of connection to my children. I would have these birds fly up above the boat, and there would be 4 birds representing all 4 of my children, and they would be squawking and playing with each other. And I just knew in my heart, I got this message that they were there visiting me, like saying, I hope you had a good time. This was my last day on the ship. I was on top of the boat looking up at the sunrise, and these birds came to visit me, and they were like squawking and like bantering with each other. And then as soon as I put my sights on them, they just made a few little circles and then just went off into the ethers. They just disappeared. And I've had a few of those instances, like on the beach here where I live. I had one of those same visions with birds. So you can pick how you can choose to see how they come to you. And it's just knowing within yourself when they're present with you. And I found that as I raised my vibration, that I could call them in and I could connect with them. Because if you think about when someone passes, their soul lives on. And they have to be at such a high vibrational level that if we're in a low vibration because we're depressed or we're sad or we're crying all the time, then we can't meet them where they are. So we have to raise our vibration to the point where we can connect with our lost loved ones. And it's a beautiful thing. It can be something just as short as the little bird thing that lasted 15 or 20 seconds. But I felt it. I knew it was them. And we can have so many of those moments in so many different ways. And you can have remembrances of just seeing a butterfly. My daughter loved butterflies. And so when I see a butterfly, I think of her. So there's so many different ways that we can find connection with the people that we lose. But we have to raise our vibration to be able to meet with them.
Incredible, Vickie. And you continue to leave me speechless. And just listening to you, there are so many messages that you have and so many things that you say that are so profound and that move me on so many levels. And it feels like you've been on a spiritual journey right from the start. Even the way of being at your daughter's hospital bed. It seems like it started even there. And it seems like you're on an incredible spiritual journey. And I'm curious, if you could just sort of describe to us the evolution of it through the various losses.
With my stillborn, I was very young then and not very aware, but looking back, I look back how I was led my whole life. I
Mm-hmm.
just didn't realize it. I was able to look back on my life after Jesse passed and see all of the connecting of the dots, all the synchronicities, all of the things that I did in my lifetime, even the jobs that I didn't think mattered, was part of this whole path. And with my daughter, with the stillborn, the first one, I really didn't know how to process that. And after my daughter was born, a year and 2 weeks after I lost the first one, and I was nervous during that whole pregnancy. I was like afraid of loss. Had this mindset. And if I knew what I knew now, I could have had a much nicer and more beautiful pregnancy, but I was always afraid of that loss because I lost the first one. But I was talking to someone one day and they said, I said, do you think that the soul of my stillborn came back in crystal? And they said, yeah, there's a possibility of her soul, because their souls can choose to come right back, or they can stay up there and just support you and be there, your guides. And I really felt like at that moment that she did kind of circle back around and she came back, and it helped me to be okay with that. And so that helped me up to that point. And but during the raising of my children and going through what I went through with my ex-husband, there was a lot of dysfunction there. I didn't have the tools that I had now, and I really felt like that impacted my children's lives, my life. I did end up in a divorce with my ex-husband, and it caused years of back and forth, up and down. And but that was part of my journey, And, but when it came to this present loss, I found that by surrendering and listening to the messages and following just like the sailboat, she asked me to go and I said, yes, I'm going. And so I went there. We had a week on the water. It was so healing to me just to be out, to feel the wind in my hair, to just kind of be by myself. Even though I was with others, they were giving me the space to just be when I needed to be by myself. So I came home and I realized that I wasn't finished with the islands. So after about being at home for 2 weeks, I went back, but this time it was to write a book. I felt a book inside of me. I felt like that it was a story that needed to be shared. And I wanted to go back to, that environment was just so healing and so comforting to me that I went back to the island just to write. But I wanted to go with the intention of being guided through that whole experience. And what happened was kind of interesting, because I get on the boat and we're out for a day or so, and we realize that we have to go and pick up people to bring back to the charter, to the base. And, my friend was saying, are you okay with this? I know you want to, do your book and be by yourself. And it's like, no, I feel like that this is exactly what's supposed to happen. So these two women came on the boat. It gave me a chance again to share my story. And they were so profoundly moved by it. I realized that it was a story that needed to be shared. And they happened to be two English majors that are wanting to be on the forum to to help me with this book, to help me write this book and make sure that it is relatable to everyone, and that it reads well, and that people can really feel the story. And then after that, there was 2 other people that ended up on our boat, and he's like, wow, this is happening again. And I'm like, hey, you know, I feel like that there's something here. When they put their stuff on the boat, there was a guitar in there. And I'm like, okay, so we're going to have music, and music is healing. And music is, you know, people getting together, enjoying something together. So I'm like, I looked at him and I said, no, we're good. We've got music on board now. And so it felt so right. You know, everything was moving along. And even though we didn't plan everything, I felt like everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to. But I did build some rituals around my day so that I could get centered. I left from the boat after 5 days on the water. I rented a B&B, and this was for me to really get down and start working on this book. And I knew in order for me to be able to do that, I would have to be able to center myself, to put myself in a position where I had felt the flow, that I could write this from the heart and really do a good job for everyone. And so I created this ritual, and I did share it, and I'd love to share it with anyone that wants it. But it starts off the morning with just a few simple exercises. I use doTERRA oils to help center me and ground me. And of course, I make sure I drink my water. I have yin yoga that I do that's so grounding and is so loving, because it's all about, yin yoga is all about going within and feeling the love within yourself and really loving yourself. We tend to put ourselves last, and especially mothers. And I realized that with this ritual, I was really showing love to myself, and it really opened up all of those channels that I needed to open up to write. And even if you're not writing a book, I suggest that people write about their experience, because it is healing. Journaling is one of the best things that I've ever done. And I would go for years and journal, and then I would go for years and not journal. And I realized that the years that I didn't journal, I really regret those years, because you know, you can look back at any given time and see what was going on in your life. And without that documentation, sometimes it's hard to remember. So I would, you know, do my exercises, do my yoga, I would journal, and just get ready to write. And then I would write for a while. I would take a walk in nature. You know, I just had a list of things in my toolbox that I could say, okay, I need to do something right now. What can I do that's going to support me in this? And I did find it really helpful just to get away and to be by myself. Right. So that was, you know, every day I would get up, do the same thing every day. When I had, wherever I stayed, if I had a bathtub, I would take salts baths. I would do everything I could to really take care of my body, take care of my mind, take care of my spirit, and just my heart, you know, because my heart was shattered. But how am I going to put this heart back together? You know, when your heart shatters, it allows light in. And with that light, I found that I have the opportunity to put my heart back together in a way that might help millions of other people to get through things like this, because it's not easy. And I still struggle with it from day to day. But now I can move through all of these emotions that I have, and let them pass through me, honor them. We tend to stuff things in. We'll have an emotion and we think, oh, I don't want to deal with that right now. Let's just stuff it away somewhere and save it for later. And once you do that about 1,000,000 times during your lifetime, you start feeling really, really heavy. And so that year or year and a half of healing that I went through really prepared me for this, because I had the tools. I knew how to get through it. And so I really suggest highly that people don't wait for something like this to happen before you start getting in touch with yourself, and before you start taking care of yourself and caring for yourself first, and giving yourself permission to be a little selfish, and think, what do I need to do to support myself right now?
Vickie, that's absolutely amazing. And I'd like to just pause for a second and take one step back to, the feeling of heart shattering, and what that feels like in the grief process and losing someone. And you spoke about self-care and all the rituals that you do to take care of yourself, which I think is fundamental and hugely, hugely important. And then there's another component too of other family members and relationship in general. And we've spoken a lot about you and the self-care component. And I wanted to pause a second and just look at, I know you've been in a long marriage for many years, and a very good marriage. And I know that grief has a tendency to oftentimes absolutely rip relationships apart, because each person is struggling so much to deal with their own grief and their own sense of loss, that it's so difficult to reach out. And then there's the whole component of blame and questioning and what ifs and should have, could have, would have. And so I wanted to just pause and ask, if you're willing to talk about it, how the impact that all of this had on your relationship and your marriage, and how it's been for you.
That has been difficult, and I've heard so many stories about a child passing and it breaks the marriage apart. And usually it breaks the marriage apart when there's already breaks in the marriage, that there's things that they maybe have not confronted, that they're not really taking care of themselves. We always compromise in relationships, so that everybody is happy. And in this case, my husband, we have a son together, Sebastian, that's 21, and he is my only surviving child at this time. But my other children, of course, were not my husband's biological children, but he loved them. He went through a lot with me in 29 years, all of the ups and downs with them being in their teenage years, all of the things, the hurdles that we had to go over, and he stuck by my side, and he was always there for me. This was a total shock, though, especially with Jesse. Jesse stayed with us when I separated from my ex-husband. I met my present husband. I didn't give my son Jesse a choice. I said, "You're coming with me." The other two were old enough to kind of make their own decision about where they wanted to be, but I didn't give him a choice. So my husband spent 9 years raising my Jesse, the 37-year-old, and they was like his son. The one thing that I think where we kind of disconnected a little bit is that I wasn't honoring his pain. And, I ran off to the islands, which I don't regret. It was something that I needed to do, but I felt like that I could have spent more time with him and helping him to confront his pain. And because he didn't want to confront his pain at the time, because he said it doesn't compare to yours. But I don't think there's any comparison. It's not, it's a loss, period. Of course, I these were my children that I gave birth to. And so it was a much deeper loss, but it didn't make his loss any less. So when I got back from the island, we did have some confrontations over a couple of weeks where we didn't really set our intentions before our conversation. And I realize sometimes, sometimes you'll be in a conversation and it doesn't go that well. And you realize afterwards, I didn't really set the intentions for how I wanted this to go. And so a lot of our conversations kind of led to nowhere. If there was just that angst between us. And one night he said, "Can we have a conversation tonight and just be honest with each other?" Because he felt like that with all of this happening to me, that I was just going to take off, that I was going to leave. And I couldn't figure out why he was having those feelings. And so we had this beautiful conversation one night, and we were able to really kind of lay everything out on the table, because with this loss, I had this message, this profound message that I needed to, first of all, write this book and share it with the world, and also to create a healing center that I've had in my heart since I had my spa. I owned a spa for 10 years in Nashville, and I always wanted to have a destination spa. And I was afraid to tell him about that because I am an entrepreneur at heart, and my goals and my dreams are huge. I don't have little small dreams of going to the pool or to the beach every day and that just being the rest of my life. I really felt like that I didn't go through all of this just to sit by the pool. I went through all of this because God is using me as a vessel. He's using me as a vessel to help other people through this and to help them see his glory and the things that he wants to reveal to them. My husband and I had a great marriage and everything, but after 29 years, I think we felt like that things were kind of getting stale. It broke that wide open for us to really look at our life and say, okay, this is breaking us apart, but now we can put it back together in a way that is loving and renewing. It was like a rebirth for both of us. And so even though earth-shattering things like this happen, I think that on the base level and the core level, it's a chance for us to look at our lives again and to really look at it with a magnifying glass and think, okay, am I really living my best life? And am I meeting my mission? Am I doing what I'm supposed to do in this lifetime? And it really revealed to me what my mission was in this life after this happened.
Incredible. Thank you for sharing that with us. That's amazing. And Vickie, I have to ask, how has the grief journey influenced the way you parent your one surviving child and, approach the challenges of motherhood in general?
Sebastian is an amazing child. When I had him, I thought that, okay, now I was going to be able to do some of the things that I wanted to do. And he went through a regression at 1.5, and I realized that no, I still had some work to do within my family. And so I spent probably the next 10 years working with him, trying to help to make him the best he could be, because he lost everything. He was speaking 2 languages. He knew all of his numbers, colors, everything, and he regressed and woke up one day with a blank slate, and we started all over again. And so that was just another journey that created what I have to share now, because he could have been on the low end of the spectrum. Autism has a huge umbrella, and there are many layers and many levels of where kids end up on the spectrum. And I was going to do everything I could possibly do to make sure that I not only cleared his mind, that because all of the injections that he had some reactions to some injections that he had, and to an antibiotic that I think caused his regression. So I wanted to clean that out. We did cleansings, we did acupuncture, we did massage, we did so many different modalities. And I really feel like that helped him to be the person he is today. In high school, he was on the principal's honor roll all 4 years. He's been on the dean's list in college, and I'm proud of that. And I would do that all over again. I didn't felt like, oh, I have to go on the back burner again. That was something that really kind of helped me. That was when I really started getting into the journey of self-care, of taking care of yourself, the food that you eat. We are what we eat, and our body is our temple. And I think that he had a lot of things within his body that we needed to clear out. And so after this happened, when I told him what happened to to Jesse, he was frightened because all 4 of my children had passed, and he thought he was next. And so he had this fear come up inside of him. And to tell the truth, I had a moment where I felt the same way. I was like, how can I protect him? I can't lose my last child. And I realized that, of course, first of all, I had to get that out of my mind, because our thoughts are powerful. We can manifest things just by thinking them. And so I knew that I had to get that out of my mind, but I knew I also had to get it out of his mind. So we had a conversation about that he was put on this earth as my gift. And that because God knew that my kids were going to go early. I didn't know that. My kids didn't know that they were going to have a short life. But he knew. And I really felt like that he gave me Sebastian as just this glorious gift, because he has been a gift to me. And I said, you're here to stay for the long haul, honey. I said, you were here as a gift for me so that I could get through this. And that seemed to really appease him. He was like, okay, that makes sense to me. And he was able to kind of drop that fear that something could happen to him, because, we don't realize that our inner dialogue can really guide us along our path and cause us to do things that is really not supporting our final mission in this life. But at the same time, I have to say that I really wanted to not have fear around him, and to just go on with life as normal, and we still tell him when we feel like, okay, you need to make sure you pick up your clothes, or, all of those kind of things. But at the same time, I realized that every last communication you have with someone could be the last communication. So when I leave him, when I go to bed, even when I leave to just go to the supermarket, I make sure that I make that final connection to be a loving connection. Because one of the things I remember with Jesse, because he was just jerked away. They called me and said that he had passed, and I never got to see him again. I didn't identify him. I never saw him. And the first thought that I went to was the last communication that we had that wasn't that nice. We had not really an argument, but I was upset over something that he didn't do, that I had asked him to do many times over the few days previous to that. And I realized that every communication you have, if you come from your heart, then it can't be a negative interaction with someone, because you don't want to have those in your mind, because for a while that's all I was thinking about is, if I'd only said this, I would felt sorry for having that negative conversation with him. And now I really make an effort to always be coming from my heart when I communicate with him. And that has changed in a positive way. It's helped me to relate to him with love and only love. Anytime that we're in anger or we're in sadness or judging, good ever comes from coming from our ego.
I find it's so challenging striking a balance between, because I've had the same experience myself of feeling regret towards having left things unsaid or said in a particular way, and it's so challenging to strike that balance, because arguments and disagreements are part and parcel of life, unfortunately. And so to always come from that space of love and caring, I find is so incredible. And it sounds almost like you've created a ritual out of doing that in and of itself, and the rituals probably become habit after a while. And what a great ritual to have, as the part of the other ones that you've had. And you mentioned some of them earlier and how instrumental they were in sort of creating routine and helping you through the process. And I know we're going to share something in a link below that goes to your website where you can share all these rituals, which I'm sure would be immensely, immensely helpful to people dealing with the same challenges. I'd love you to just talk to us a little bit about some of those rituals and how you start your day, and maybe give us a little bit of an idea about that.
Yes. I actually start my day when I wake up in the morning. One of the first things that I say to myself or think to myself is, I'm so grateful for another day, another shot at it, another day to serve, to be a light for someone else, or even for myself. And so before you even get out of the bed, if you can start off with those intentions, then it gives you a good start for the rest of the day. And you can just take that couple of minutes before you get up to think about how you're going to show up for yourself, for others, that you want to be, like I said, that shining light, so that people, when they see you, they can see your aura. They can see that you're coming with love. And when you're coming at someone with love, it can't go any other way. Even if you approach someone that's angry, if you only come back at them with love, it just kind of collapses. Their anger just goes away and they feel your love. And so I think that's always a great way to start. And then, while I'm having my coffee, I'll take that time to do my little exercises. There's one called a gasku, where you do the stretch, and it'll be on my website too, but you do these stretches that kind of help to get your body like woke up, for the day. And I have the oils from doTERRA. We don't realize that all our olfactory senses, all of these oils actually help to create a resonance within you. And there's an oil for everything. If you're really trying to, if you're going through grief, there's oils for helping you to ground yourself, or to find balance, or to unveil, or just to have an awakening there. And I suggest that for everyone. And it's so powerful, and people don't realize that all of these things are thoughts, the things that we have in our environment, the foods that we eat, everything that we do, even the clothes that we wear. You know, we wear a lot of synthetics, and people don't realize that, you know, your body is the largest organ of your body, or your skin is the largest organ of your body. And with the synthetics, with all of the chemicals that are in these clothing, seep into your skin, and it's toxic. And so I really try to be really aware of the things that I put on my body, the things I put in my body, and especially the thoughts. The thoughts are so powerful, and we don't realize that sometimes we manifest our own outcomes. And, you know, we say, oh, well, nothing good ever happens for me, so nothing good ever happens for you. You know, we are so powerful. And if we just knew how powerful we were, and if we knew how to tap into that, then your life just exponentially gets easier when you surrender and you just feel guided. And right now, I feel so guided in my life, and I don't feel like that I really have to make hard decisions, because they're coming to me. You know, these messages, the coincidences, the synchronicities, everything is there, but it's because I'm willing to see them. I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to feel from my heart these messages that are coming to me from all around. And everyone is getting these messages. They're just too closed off to see them sometimes. And especially when you're going through something like this, and you're and you need to be curled up sometimes and just have that cry. You know, you need to learn that it's okay. Give yourself permission to go through that, but also learn how to surrender to it, and learn that with such profound loss, there's something really huge coming your way. And just the allowance of it, and thinking that you're worthy of it, is so important, because if we don't feel like we're worthy of anything better, then we're not going to be able to see it. So that, you know, that for me, all of the rituals, I found that yin yoga, because it works on opening up the hips, and the hips are where a lot of your emotions are, especially when it comes to mothering, to the sacral area, the root chakra. You know, that's where your children are born.
Mm.
And by opening up all of those, your hips, it really helps you to process. And I would do yoga twice a day. I would do it in the morning before I started writing, and then before I went to bed at night. And after a few days, I realized that I was okay during the day. You know, I would, you know, start writing, and sometimes it would bring up emotion, and I would cry, which was amazing. It felt wonderful. But then I realized that while I was doing the yoga was the perfect time for me to release. And I was able to release things that that it felt so deep, and it felt so beautiful. And I found that the rest of my day would go better, and I would sleep better at night, because I knew that when I did the yoga, I was going to release. I was going to be able to really release some things, but in the safety of myself.
Thank you for sharing that, Vickie. And, you know, I'm continually inspired by what you have to say, and your way of being. And I'd like to also address something. You know, you made reference to going into emotions and crying when it comes up. And I'd like to speak a little bit about that, because, you know, speaking to you, you know, and maybe people who are watching this for the first time and seeing you for the first time may think, oh my gosh, she's got it so together, and she's so joyful, and she's got so much direction and a plan and a future. And but my experience of you in previous conversations is that you absolutely do allow the emotions to flow through. You know, when we're having a conversation and the emotions come up, there's no holding back. You absolutely let it flow through, and you give it its space, and you give it its time, and you honor it, which I think is so beautiful. And then you continue and you sort of recenter or come back to yourself. And I'd love to speak a little bit into that, of what advice you can give to people, you know, even like myself. I mean, it took me 15 years to process, you know, the first time I really experienced the grief of a loved one. And so for me, it's remarkable to see someone like you, and how you are in the face of it. And I would love to hear what advice you have for others who are really going through intense grief and pain of the loss, and how they can find meaning and purpose, and especially the people who, you know, are looking to live a life that's more authentic and live it more fully.
Um, before these last two events happened, I had spent about 1.5 years on my healing journey, as I said earlier. And I was at probably the happiest that I'd ever been in my life. You know, I was healing, and as I healed, it trickled down all around me. You know, I had difficult relationships, especially with my daughter, through the divorce and the separation and the back and forth. And I always felt like that it was a struggle for us to really love each other. And when I went through my healing, it actually helped us to heal. And we were better, you know, and that's one thing I was so grateful for, that our relationship was mended when she passed. And that was so much solace to me, to feel like that had I not gone through that healing, the situation would have been completely different. And looking at it as with no judgments, you know, there was a lot of years that my daughter and her husband, there was a lot of angst there, and you know, we weren't getting along, and it could have turned into a really big brawl in the hospital, right? I mean, you know, I could have been judging him, and he could have been judging me for whatever. And by having done all of this healing, I knew that I had to go into that room full of love, and just to be there with no judgment. And if I had not had that healing before, I don't think it would have went as well. And what was I saying?
The advice that you have for other people going
Yes.
through the same.
Yeah, it's like, you know, at this point, it's happened. There's nothing you can do that's going to bring that person back. So you have two choices. You can wallow in it and be in just in pain, and feel like that you have to mourn them, and you can't be happy because, you know, that wouldn't be respecting their memory. But I'm telling you, I know for a fact that they want us to be joyous. They want us to raise our vibration and be happy, because then we can connect with them on a totally different level. And my solace here was that I thought about how where she is in her journey right now. She is vibrating at such a high level, and she is in perfect form. She's not in pain. She has no more asthma. She is free to be there for everyone. You know, when she took her last breath, I was in the hospital room. It was early in the morning. I was still I was laying down on the cot next to the bed, and I just knew that that was her last breath. Something I felt it. And I closed my eyes, and I imagined her soul just bursting into a million butterflies. And now she is everywhere for everyone, all at the same time. And she could never do that before. She had been stuck in a wheelchair before she finally had surgeries to fix her hips. And she always felt limited and like she couldn't do the things that she wanted to do. And I couldn't be selfish to want her here no matter what, because she could have come out of this, but maybe she wouldn't have been her. Maybe she wouldn't have been 100%. So I kind of just prayed for the best thing for her, not for me, but for whatever should happen for her to be her best self, for her to be able to live pain-free, and whatever that might be, you know, if it was losing her or not, you know, because I think we can be selfish. We don't want to lose our loved ones. So we're, you know, just bound and determined that, you know, we're just going to stick in there and hang in there. And then sometimes they do live, but they're not living at their best. Like, and sometimes they even live in vegetative states. I knew that she didn't want that. So my prayer was that the right thing happens for her, to support her and her journey. And it's just not thinking of yourself. It's thinking of your loved one and what is the best thing for them at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Did that answer your question?
It absolutely does. And yes, incredible how selfless you are, especially from you know, being a mother. And I'd like to talk about the unleashing of a million butterflies around your daughter, and the beautiful image that comes around that. And I know that you are writing a book, and I'm sure, like myself, I mean, I have a million other questions for you, and I'm sure that you're going to address them all in the book that you're busy writing. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that and what inspired you to write it. And I know that you're creating a healing center too, which is incredible. And I'd love to hear what impact you're hoping to have on others who are going through a similar journey, and how the unleashing of a million beautiful butterflies ties into all of that.
If you read the story about the butterfly, you know, the butterfly lays their eggs, and then, you know, the caterpillar is born, it cocoons, and it goes through this metamorphosis that is painful. And I saw my daughter go through that metamorphosis in the hospital. She was, it was really difficult to watch at times. And so she went through that pain in order for us to receive some healing through this. It put me and my son-in-law in a room together in the hospital for 5 days, where I actually met him for the first time. And but the day that she passed, and I just pictured those butterflies just fluttering out into this big field of flowers, and she's lighting on all of these flowers, and those flowers are all of the different people that she wants to touch in her life. And I thought that was such a beautiful thing, just to be selfless enough that I could let her go. And but the story about Pete coming back into the room, when we put her in self-care, which means they take everything away and they're just basically waiting for her to expire. And he said, I can't watch this. And I said, Pete, you have to do what's right for yourself. It could have been a big fight. You know, I can't believe you're not going to be here for your wife. You know, I mean, that could have turned into a whole big thing. But my mission walking into the hospital room from day one was to be a vessel for Crystal to move through me, to be there for her family, because they were so close. They were so tightly knit, and they've been through so much together. And so I left no judgment there. And I said, Pete, you have to do what's right for yourself. So he leaves the room. And in about 5 minutes, he walks back into the room. And he said, Crystal turned me around at the stairs. She told me that we never leave each other behind. And so we spent the next 5 days eating together, laughing together, telling stories, getting to know each other really for the first time. Because, you know, before it was like we always had that relationship where it was just friction. And I think I was always afraid it would turn into a fight. So we just never had those conversations. Here, it was like we left all of that at the door and we just met each other with love. And I really got to know him for the first time, and he got to know me. And we connected on a totally different level. And my daughter knew that he had trust issues growing up and that he didn't trust adults that much. And he needed for us to trust each other before she could go. So she's right there in the room. And I totally believe that they know what's going on. They hear the conversations. Even if you're in another room, they're everywhere. They know exactly what's going on. And she went for 2.5 weeks in comfort care, which should have only lasted a few hours or a day at the most. And the nurses, the doctors were like flabbergasted that she was lasting this long. And I said, you don't know my daughter. She is doing some work right now. She is healing some hearts, and she is making some connections that needs to be there for Pete to be able to raise these boys on her own. Even going back before that, the 4 years that she spent in an unimaginable pain with her hips took her out of being able to raise her boys. You know, she couldn't function. She couldn't walk across the room. So it forced Pete to become everything to them, which needed to happen for him to be okay and to know what to do with his kids. You know, if that was just thrust up on him because she had a car accident and died, you know, he wouldn't have known what to do. So her soul was preparing this whole family way before this happened. And it was beautiful to sit and go back. And I told Pete, you know, one of the things that we talked about was that the baby is 7. And he became a daddy's boy because Crystal couldn't go out and play with him. She couldn't do all the things that she really wanted to do with him. So think about if he was a mama's boy and his mom had passed. That would have been, it was hard on him still, but he was a daddy's boy. You know, he still had that strong connection with his dad. And what if he didn't have that? It's like her soul was working way before this happened and created this environment so that when she did pass, they were all accepting of it because they knew that she was no longer in pain, that she was vibrating at a totally different level, that she was now in perfect form. There was no more pain. There was no more asthma. There was no more sadness. There was no more trauma in her life. And we started like making these connections, and he was just surprised. He was like, you know, I never thought of that. And by him hearing those things, and by me being in the space that I was in and knowing what healing is like and what you need to move through in order to see some of the messages, he grew just exponentially. He grew, and I am so proud of him right now because he's handling this whole thing so beautifully. And he's there for himself, but he's also there for his children. And he's not like hiding in a corner and feeling the pain. So there's so much that you can see, even in the depth of the pain and the depth of an experience. There's always healing going on during that and after that and before that. Like, this started way before this whole event even happened. And it was really a beautiful thing to acknowledge it and to bring it forward so that he could see it, the kids could see it. I had these conversations with them. She visited all of us before she passed. She visits her son Ian in dreams. She audibly visits the oldest one, Christian, and the baby, and Pete. They hear her messages, and it was really beautiful that she visited every one of us before she passed, and she allowed us to feel what she was feeling. And it was sadness, because she loved them so much. She really didn't want to transition, but she knew that that's what her soul, and it was her time, and that she needed to make this transition, but she wanted everybody to be okay when she did that. And to go back and put all of the pieces of the puzzle together was the most beautiful thing. And it made me look at her death in a totally different light.
Yeah, and so there must be a re-experiencing of all of it, having to write your book and go through that whole process, which in and of itself must be, a healing journey. Just the act of writing all of it. Can you tell us a little bit about your book, Vickie?
The name of the book is The Mother of All Memoirs, because this is the first book of many.
Actually, Vickie, if you have it on your screen and you'd love to share it, go ahead.
Let me, yeah. Oh, well, I need to share my screen first. Hold on. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. When I started to write this book, I read something from Wayne Dyer, that when he wrote a book, he would create the cover first as inspiration. And so, thinking of my daughter, she had a butterfly tattoo on her shoulder, and she always loved butterflies. She was drawn to butterflies. And when I saw this picture, it just fit this whole situation, and it really honored her and her spirit. I just see her and all of these butterflies just fluttering out into the distance. And it was from pain to purpose. In every situation that you find yourself that is so painful, there is purpose, and there's love wrapped all around that if we choose to see it. And the other option is not to see it, to be in doubt or despair. And not only do they not want us to feel that way, but we want to be present for ourselves and the people that we have in our life still. I've heard of stories of especially mothers that close themselves off, and the kids that they still have at home are negatively affected because they can't get out of the pain of the loss. And what I did was learn so much about how I wanted to move into my relationship with my husband, with my son, with other people in my family. And it just made my heart grow bigger. And it made I love my children more now than I ever did. There was times when, you worry about your kids, you want your kids to be successful, and you feel when they trip and they fall over a hurdle and they make mistakes or whatever, and you feel that pain right along with them. And now all I feel is love. All I feel is that they have no restrictions now. They have nothing in their way. And what an amazing feeling that must be for them. And all I can feel for myself is that, you know, if I can let go of them being here in physical form, I can meet up with them on such a different level and see them at work. I see them at work all around me. You know, the her husband had always wanted to be a drug counselor, and he spent his life in addiction and that kind of thing, but that was his path to guide him to be the best addiction counselor he could possibly be. Because unless you experience it, you can't tell people how to get through it. It's impossible. You know, you have a degree on the wall, but you've never experienced it. How can you possibly help somebody through that? So by him seeing that this is his chance to do something that's been on his heart for such a long time, and Crystal's smiling right now. She's so proud that he was able to step out of the pain. And his, you know, stuff going back a few years, 20 years ago, he lost his brother at a very young age. He was only like maybe 19 or 20 years old. And he spent 20 years just mourning over him and being sad and, you know, getting into his addiction even deeper than he already was. And by us talking for those 5 days, he realized that there was another way to go. There was another way to look at this whole situation. And it's just, I'm really so in awe of him that he has grown so much to go from just crawling under, like in a hole and going down that rabbit hole, that he is really trying to expand his heart and open up his heart and see what he can do to serve and to meet his mission that he was supposed to have in this lifetime. So it just kind of opened doors for him. And he's seeing that, because sometimes we don't see the things that are right in front of us because we're so marred in it. You know, we're so deep down into the hurt and the pain of it that we can't see all of the good things, that the gifts that we were given in place of that person in our life.
And it feels like it's leading you into your mission and your purpose.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, I think I said earlier that I feel like that they gave me all of their power and the things, their inspiration, the things that they wanted to do in their life. You know, I found, you know, just talking to my daughter, they always wanted to have an addiction center where they used plant medicine and not the 12 steps and that kind of thing. You know, the success rate in most of your addiction centers are very low. We're talking about maybe 2 or 3% success rate. And so that's not working. You know, I think there's another way, and I think plant medicine is a great way to get there. And that's the direction that they were going in. And my son, I found something that he wrote 8 days before he passed. And he wanted to be a creator of many things, but things that were going to make a difference for people. You know, he wanted to be a motivational speaker his whole life and share his addiction, his drug and alcohol addiction that he went through during his life, and to help people. And he came out as gay in his late 20s, I guess. And that's difficult for people to come out like that to their families because they never know how they're going to be received. And he wanted to speak to people about that and let them know that, you know, that you have to trust and you have to open yourself up so that you're not bottling it all up inside of you. So many years ago, when I had my spa, I wanted to do the destination spa. But in the last 20 years, all of these things and going through my healing, I realized that I wasn't ready to do that then. And that wasn't really the essence of what I was supposed to do. You know, the essence was so much grander than that. It was really helping people to heal on a deep, deep level and to find joy in their life. And, you know, sometimes we laugh and we have joy, but do we feel that on a regular basis? And can we feel that joy even when we're thinking of the people that we lost?
Mm.
And there again, like if I thought of something that was painful, I would honor it, because without feeling the pain, you don't know what joy feels like. Without, you know, there's a yin and a yang to everything, and it's oh, I think I lost my train of thought.
The yin and the yang to everything.
Yes, well, you know, to feel one emotion, you need to feel the other side and
Yeah,
honor both of
of
them,
course.
you know. And so I would honor them, but at the end, I would try to think of something that was pleasant, that made me smile about them. And I was at the same time rewiring my brain. And eventually, over a couple of weeks, when I thought of them, I might have some tears, but they were tears of joy. I was feeling something different than I felt before. And it was just such a nicer way to go about mourning my children, because, you know, like earlier I said, you have two choices. You can be marred in it, or you can lift yourself up by this experience and expand your awareness, and to realize that we only have the present moment. We're not promised the next minute, the next hour, the next day. And every minute that we live should just exude love and forgiving and compassion and patience. You know, we don't have patience. We want everything yesterday, and we don't allow for these things to just organically unfold for us.
Right.
And since this happened and I surrendered everything, I find that things are coming to me. They're unfolding in such a beautiful way. And this healing center is going to help people on so many different levels. And it's like, you know, you don't have to have a profound loss for this
Correct.
to really bring a totally different essence to your and help you to live more authentically, you know, and not count on other people for your happiness.
The concept of yin and yang, you know, that you were talking about before, and plant medicines in general, you know, we've discussed this. I'm a huge proponent of plant medicines and the healing powers that they have. And I remember once doing a journey where it very clearly showed me that grief is simply the flip side of love. And it's almost as if the bigger and the more intense the grief, the more the love. Because if you think about it, you wouldn't grieve someone that you hardly knew or didn't love or didn't feel any kind of emotion for. So it's also about, as you're saying, you know, developing that new relation to grief in general and seeing it for what it is. It's just a massive amount of love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It really, you know, it breaks your heart open, but it also opens you
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
to receiving and to realizing that that's all there is love.
Yeah.
If we choose to look at it that way. And sometimes we, you know, we judge other people for how they show up with us. And they're there to give us the experience that we're supposed to experience with them. And when we realize that, we shouldn't be mad at somebody for triggering us, we should thank them for the opportunity to heal that trauma or that wound that we stuffed way down inside. You know, what they did was trigger something else that was already inside of you that you really needed to confront and unearth and peel back that layer to just lighten your load. And that whole year and a half, really prepared me for this. And had I not had that, I'm not sure I would be sitting here talking to you today.
Mm.
So I really highly suggest for people to maybe go on a journey, a healing journey, and honor some of these things that they've got stuffed away into their body. Because if you talk to anyone that has any particular illness, you can trace it back to a trauma or something, because different types of trauma settle in different parts of your body. And if we realize just how powerful that is, then we want to honor those things and get rid of them so that we can make room for more love. You know, do we want to be filled with love, or do we want to be filled with some love and a lot of trauma that we
Right.
just have thought that we have to hang on to it because we have nowhere else to put it? But there is a way to process that and to really honor it with love, but empty that vessel so that you can fill that up with love.
Sure. Vickie, question for you. Are there any books that you've come across along your journey or through your journey that you have found helpful, that you feel could be helpful to other people?
Yes. Yes. The first two books that I read when I started my journey, my healing journey, was Radical Forgiveness by Colin Tipping and The 28 Days of Gratitude. I did not realize that there were so many different ways you could look at gratitude and find gratitude. You know, when you sit down at the table, one of the days was showing gratitude for the people that actually plant those seeds for that beautiful meal that's sitting in front of you. You know, let's go back to the core, back to the beginning of where this food came from, and honor those people and send those people love. You know, the farmers they work really hard to get those things, that beautiful meal on our table. And just there was one day where you mend relationships, you know, and you have a picture of the person that you want to mend your relationship with. And there's just so many different ways in that 28 days. You were able to see gratitude from so many different avenues in so many different ways that it made you realize that there's so much to be grateful for, even in the midst of the pain. Every day when I was in the hospital, I tried to write my gratitudes. I would still write my gratitudes. And when you're in that space and that container, it's like you want to just feel, how could I be happy? You know, what can I be happy about? So my gratitudes at that point is that I was able to spend this time with my grandchildren, that I was able to meet and connect with her husband on a totally different level, that I had this 48 days with her where I did her manicure and pedicure for her. I braided her hair. I talked to her about things that we wanted to do, because you know, the first 28 days, we were looking for a miracle. We were praying for a miracle because I knew they existed. I read stories where the doctors gave no chance of survival and they came out of it in perfect form. So I knew that the miracles were out there, but I also knew that it wasn't my choice, you know, that I could pray for them. But if it was her time to go, then I couldn't question that. I had to trust that it was all in the divine order, and that it was exactly what was supposed to happen at that moment for other things to take place, for other healing, for other awarenesses to raise up, and for other people to be touched. Everyone that I've told about in the story, whether they've lost someone or not, have felt it so deeply that I realized that this was something that everybody could use. This is a story that's going to touch people whether they knew her or not. I had a friend of mine that her ex-husband had children from another marriage, and they hadn't spoken in years. And when she called him to tell him that she had come here to help me with the passing of my daughter. And she was here when I got the news about my son. And I realized that that's the reason why she was here. She was here to help me through that, because that was shocking. That really shook me to my core. And so when she called to tell him that he needed to care for the children that they had together, that she needed to stay longer, he picked up the phone and called his two kids. And he connected with him and them, and he had not connected with him for many years. And he didn't know me. He didn't know my daughter, but it touched him in such a profound way that it caused him to create an action, to take an action step, and to mend fences with his kids, because he realized that he may not have that chance, and there might be regrets on his part if he didn't do that. So I see this really profoundly changing the way people look at their relationships with their kids, with their spouses, with everyone in their life.
Yeah, it's a powerful catalyst for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I don't want to squander this, I mean, if this is my mission, then I feel so led right now that I'm actually, our last conversation that I had with my husband is that I could be moving to the islands to open the center, and he doesn't want to go. And I felt hurt by that in the beginning, but I understood it later, that he couldn't go right then, but he finally honored what I needed to do and said, I see this, he could see how heavy it was on my heart that I needed to do this. And just him honoring this and giving me not permission, but just the support. And he finally said, what do you need to support you in this and in making this happen? And that alone arrested any fears that I had around our relationship, because I felt like he understood me at that moment, that it could mean separation for us for that time. But I think in a way it helps us to kind of revamp our own life, because I said earlier, we shouldn't depend on someone else for our wholeness. And that separation is going to help us to be centered within ourselves, and could create and has created a much closer relationship with him. I love him on a totally different level than I did before, because before we had that heart to heart and we were fighting there for a couple of weeks about that, it was all about, we were judging each other, and because inside I felt like that he wasn't going to understand what I needed to do. And that was all an illusion, because if you go at each other without the intention of coming from your heart, then it never leads to anything. But as soon as we sat down and we had a heart to heart, that's when everything beautifully came together, and we realized that, okay, this is what's happening now. This is what needs to happen right now, but it doesn't mean the end. It's just a new beginning.
Yeah, and maybe an even more powerful beginning. Vickie, one last question for you before we wrap up, and I would love to continue this further, but if you had one overarching message for the world, what would it be?
Trusting, surrendering, and thinking of your body as your temple. He incarnated in us into this body that we have, but he meant for us to take care of it. He meant for us to be at our best so that we could feel the vibrations that he's sending us, so that he can send us the messages that we need to move forward with our life and meet our mission. But we can't hear those messages if we're not listening, if we're not aware, if we don't have our ears and our eyes open and our heart open. And this type of loss tends to kind of close you off. And in radical forgiveness, quickly, I want to share when Princess Diana died. The author of the book, Colin Tipping, his brother was in the UK and called him in the middle of the night, telling him what was going on. And he's like, "Why are you calling me? You know, it's 3 o'clock in the morning here." But he really pondered on it. He's like, you know, there's got to be, because his book is all about things having a reason and a purpose behind it. And as he thought about it, he realized that her mission in this life was to open the heart chakra of the world, because she was so loved by so many people. And in the UK, he was explaining that especially the men do not show their emotions in public. And especially the queen never shows her emotion in public. And she put her head on top of her casket that day and showed emotion. And men were weeping in the stands. And that was her mission, was to open the heart chakra of the world. I mean, for her children, I would think that that would give me so much solace to think, wow, my mom is so powerful. You know, she brought on this ability to open people's hearts up. And I really feel like that is what this situation did for me, is it opened my eyes, it opened my heart, it opened my mind to that there are no limitations. There's only possibilities out there, and they're everywhere if I choose to see them.
Wow.
And so that's just the trust and surrendering to it and allowing things to happen in their own time. You know, we tend to get in too big of a hurry, and then we lose the journey along the way. You know, we don't chart our journey, and that's where the journaling really comes in. You know, we're not enjoying the path. We just want to get from point A to point Z, and we don't recognize all of the things that happen in the middle that make us who we are.
I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the person who put you on my path, and, you know, express a moment of gratitude to her
Yes.
for connecting us, because, you know, honestly, I don't even know how to start thanking you and acknowledging you for this talk that we have had and for the time that we've spent together. And I want to thank you for sharing so openly and so vulnerably. And I am completely enrolled in your mission and in your story and helping share your story, because I feel it holds so much value and has so many different messages on so many different levels. And I feel that the sharing of your story in and of itself it's an honoring of your children, it's an honoring of your husband, it's an honoring of yourself, it's an honoring of the grief process. And I have to say, for me personally, just listening to you has been an absolute masterclass in, it's been a masterclass in spirituality, in surrender, in connection, in motherhood, in relationship. It's been a masterclass in transforming grief, in the honoring of your children, of self-care, of being selfless. I could just go on. And most importantly, it's been, you know, a masterclass in love. And I feel like it won't just be for me, but for so many other people out there. And so I'm honored to be able to share your story and be part of it and be on your journey and be on this path with you. It's been an absolute gift, Vickie. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I so appreciate you, because this is the first of many. You know, I really feel like that this message is really going to catch on, and people are going to receive so much healing from it. I really believe that with my heart. So I appreciate you giving me the first opportunity. You know, this is the first podcast that I've done on this. So hopefully I touched all of the bases that I meant to touch, and it did come from the heart. So thank you so much for allowing me to share my story.